I will also say that NATO has already lost this war, right? Because these past 3 years, NATO has been fighting an ideal war, right? It's not using its manpower, it's using Ukrainian manpower, but it's providing targeting, it's providing intelligence, it's providing financing, it's providing weapons, it's providing special forces. And so these past 2 years, NATO has been fighting the ideal war, to use Ukrainian proxies, but then use NATO strategy. And it's been a complete disaster for both Ukraine and for NATO. These counteroffensive that Ukraine has been launching has been disastrous for Ukrainians. It's estimated that Ukrainians have lost between 1 to 2 million men in this war. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a lot of people, because these are your best fighters. These are your most motivated fighters. And now Ukraine is forced to recruit people randomly off the streets. And that's why you have these massive desertions in the Ukrainian army. So the war is done. It really is.
The autumn campaign is in full swing in the combat zone. The Russian army is trying to consolidate the success achieved in the summer and continues the offensive even in conditions of slock and rain. Armed forces of Ukraine are sitting in a flexible defense almost everywhere. The hottest direction is still Donetsk. The south and center groups drove a wedge between the defensive lines of the armed forces of Ukraine near Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. The Russian command has long abandoned frontal assaults and is betting on the isolation of settlements to cut off supplies and communications in order to take the storm or force the garrison to flee in panic. In recent days, the greatest successes are near Konstantinovka. The units of the South Group eliminated the boiler south of the Kleban-Bek reservoir. This pocket slammed shut at the end of August, when the Kleban-Bek was liberated. 2 motorized infantry battalions were surrounded, completely cut off from the supply. They were pressed against the reservoir. Their destruction was only a matter of time. Now the Russian troops have the opportunity to focus on Konstantinovka. The city is being attacked through from the village of the Kleban-Bek, located on a hill. Under the cover of artillery and drones, the assault units will have to bypass the reservoir and approach Konstantinovka from the south. At the same time, the city is under pressure from the west, from Stepanovka, as well as from the east, from Chasiv Yar. All that remains is to cut the H20 highway to Druzhivka. When this happens, a new boiler is formed. Pokrovsk is also almost surrounded, as well as neighboring Minograd. This agglomeration was covered from the south, east, and north. The logistics of the garrison is supported only by the E50 highway to Pavlograd. North of Pokrovsk, units and formations of the North Group continue to advance on Dogopilia. To the east, fierce battles for the triangle of Pokrovsk, Poltava, and Lusinya do not stop. Toward Lyman, there is also progress in the north of the DPR. At the end of September, units of the West Group occupied Kirovsk in the Bakhmut district. From here to Krasny Liman, there are only 8 kilometers in a straight line, without any settlements. They also make their way to the city from the north, from Derilivo and Shandriglovo. Liberation of the Liman is necessary for the attack on Slavyansk from the northeast. The northern direction has been static for a long time. Now the Ministry of Defense has reported on the complete clearing of the Sibyansky forests and Kuzminovka on the T0513 highway, 6 kilometers from the city. After its liberation, Russian control over the border between the DPR and the LPR will be restored. In the Kharkiv region, fierce battles for Kupyansk do not stop. Units and formations of the west block a large group of Ukrainians from the north and the west. From the east, the Ukrainians are pressed against the Oskil River. They only have 2 roads left to the rear, the southwestern R07 to Kharkiv and the southern R79 to Osinovka and Prescient. As previously reported by the Russian Ministry of Defense, more than half of the buildings in Kupyansk came under the control of the Russian troops. It's not easy, however, for the Russians to move forward. An experienced and ideologically motivated Ukrainian enemy is fighting in Kupyansk. Nationalists from the Freka detachment and GUR special forces. However, their strength is waning. Bold tactics helped the West units to succeed. Stormtroopers entered the city through the pipe of the main gas pipeline. This is the third installment of the flow operation. The first to do so were the servicemen of the center near Avdiivka, the second, the north grouping near Sudzha, and this time the enemy was also caught by surprise. In fact, the Russian army has invented a new type of combat, pipeline warfare. The possibilities of this tactic in Ukraine are very wide, since the entire territory is entangled in a network of gas pipelines. Probably the fate of Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka Siversk, Liman will be decided in the winter campaign. Cool weather will weaken the effectiveness of the use of drones, which will allow Russians to move forward. Russian troops retain the initiative and put pressure on the Ukrainian enemy along the entire line of contact. So before we continue with the rest of the video, can I ask that you support this channel in one of four ways? You see, this channel has recently come off of a shadow ban, and my last two videos have gotten some more reach. So for all of you who are new to my channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because that's important. And support this channel either with a super thanks donation or through PayPal, or most of all, consider joining the channel membership. There are two tiers. The first tier is if you just want to support my work. It's a very cheap and affordable method. The second tier has a lot more perks, such as early access to videos, exclusive video analysis, and lots of combat footage. Now let's get back to the video. According to Vitaly Ganchev, head of the military civil administration of the Kharkiv region, Russian forces have taken control of approximately 70% of Kupyansk. He said that Russian units are now consolidating their positions inside the city. Ganchev explained that this figure is approximate, as some areas shift hands during the fighting, first coming under Russian control, and then being reinforced to enable further advances within the city. He noted that there are still so-called grey zones inside Kupyansk, and fighting continues. Military sources report that during the battle for Kupyansk, Ukrainian forces have lost more than 2,500 troops. Russian units are continuing their advance deeper into the city. Analysts suggest that the next objective for the Russian army is to secure and clear the territory of the Automotive Transport College, where several Ukrainian units were reportedly abandoned. In addition, Ukrainian command has reportedly redeployed armored vehicles to the area in an attempt to form a blockade. According to analysts, this move may be a preparation for a counterattack aimed at cutting off advancing Russian troops from their main forces. In fact, reinforcements for Ukraine are direly needed across various fronts at the same time. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that Ukrainian forces lost nearly 10,000 troops in a week, with the heaviest casualties in the center and east operational directions. The Russian Ministry of Defense has released its weekly summary of Ukrainian losses in the zone of the special military operation. According to the report, the North Group of Forces eliminated 1,355 Ukrainian servicemen over the past week. The West, or Zapad Formation, reported that enemy losses in its area of operations reached 1,575 soldiers and officers during 7 days of fighting. Commanders of the Yug, or South Group, stated that their troops neutralized 1,115 Ukrainian military personnel over the same period. The Dnieper Group reported 455 Ukrainian soldiers killed within the sector. In turn, the Center Group of the Russian Armed Forces assessed Ukrainian losses at 3,120 personnel in the operational zone. Meanwhile, the Vostok, or East Group, announced that 2,360 Ukrainian servicemen were eliminated in its area of responsibility. In total, according to consolidated data from all formations, the overall Ukrainian losses for the week across the entire front amounted to approximately 9,970 personnel. The figures, as presented by the Russian Ministry of Defense, reflect the intensity of the ongoing hostilities along multiple sectors of the front, where positional battles and offensive actions continue to shape the dynamics of the conflict. Russian forces also encircled the Ukrainian battalion group near Siversk after securing key heights, leaving trapped troops under heavy fire and without retreat. Military expert Andrei Marochko stated that a Ukrainian battalion tactical group has been encircled by Russian forces near Siversk. According to Marochko, Russian armed forces achieved tactical success in the area of Kuzminovka in the DPR and secured advantageous positions west of the village of Yemka. The These developments, he explained, led to the operational encirclement of the Ukrainian battalion group that continues to hold fortified positions in the elevated terrain between the mentioned settlements. Maruchko reported that the opening of the emerging cauldron around the Ukrainian troops currently measures about 3 kilometers, but the encircled forces are already deprived of any real opportunity to retreat in an organized manner. He noted that the dense and continuous Russian fire prevents the Ukrainian servicemen from leaving the encircled area without significant losses. The expert emphasized that Ukrainian Battalion Tactical Group found itself in this position due to what he described as incompetent command decisions by the Ukrainian armed forces. And even Ukrainian sources expressed concern about the Lyman front. Rostislav Yashishin, the head of communications for the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine, said the following on Espresso TV. Quotations, "We continue to hold Torsky and Zarichny as much as possible. I'm not saying we can do it completely, but I assure you that the guys in our brigade are doing everything that they can to hold back the enemy in this direction. We see advances to the north, and the Russians are also focusing on moving south, trying to enter Lyman," he emphasized. According to the head of communications for the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, the Russian army is focusing primarily on capturing the city of Lyman, as it is extremely important as a transport hub. In reality, the situation is extremely difficult because the Russian enemy is deploying a huge number of infantry, not just Russians, but also mercenaries from other countries, he claims. These are people with legal troubles who are immediately offered contracts, allowing them to gather a massive force and push toward Torsky and Zarichny, he added. So amidst this grim reality for the Ukraine battlefield front, why have we still seen a sudden re-emergence of the Ukrainian victory narrative? Indeed, since Donald Trump's return to the White House, talk of a stalemate in Ukraine has become a convenient Western refrain, a kind of phrase that sounds sober while disguising strategic drift. In reality, what looks static on the battlefield conceals deep political movement both in Washington and in the war itself. In fact, a US think tank called the National Security Journal entitled an article, "Sorry Europe, Ukraine has already lost the war to Russia." It mimics the words of Professor Jiang at the beginning of this video and a clip that will be played at the end. It writes that the dominant Western narrative is that most of Ukraine could be regained and the war could be turned around with European support. In quotations, however, that view is not only overly optimistic, but also entirely incorrect. The fact of the matter is this, the article writes, Europe is not in a position today to arm Ukraine effectively, and whatever investment it makes in developing and/or manufacturing new weapons, whether under the aegis of NATO or the EU, it will take years, if not decades, for those investments to result in deployed armaments. In the meantime, Russia is continuing to press on throughout the 4 contested oblasts, increasingly occupying more of Ukrainian land. The sad reality is that Ukraine has lost the war, it says. It and its European partners just have not yet come to terms with that harsh reality. This harsh reality poses a significant threat to Ukraine. As Russia tightens its grip on the contested oblasts, the chances of a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive grow increasingly slim to non-existent. The belief that Ukraine can reclaim its territory through military action is becoming a distant fantasy. The balance of power has shifted decisively in Russia's favor, and any attempts by Ukraine to restore that balance could lead to further territorial losses. The grim truth is that Kiev is unlikely to create the conditions necessary for the return of Crimea, which has become deeply woven into Russia's political and military fabric. The longer the conflict drags on, the more entrenched Russia becomes, making any future diplomatic efforts more challenging for Ukraine. Given these circumstances, Ukraine and its European allies must reconsider their strategic objectives. Relying solely on military solutions and the assumption that increased military aid will lead to victory is not only misguided, but also dangerous. The hard cold truth is that Ukraine lost the war, the article finishes. It just hasn't dawned on its leaders yet. As the war of attrition continues, both Ukraine and its European allies will need to reevaluate and explore other means to achieve a just peace and stability. Wishful thinking is over. The straight talk is now.
If you just look at what's happening on the front lines, Ukrainians are not able to hold the front lines. So in August, there's this Pokrovsk breakthrough where these Russians launched these probing attacks, and they discovered the Ukrainian defenses are very weak. And the Ukrainian response, it's very telling because the Ukrainians actually had to redeploy forces from elsewhere to stopgap that breakthrough. All right. So militarily speaking, that's a disaster. When you're forced to redeploy forces, when you're forced to move forces around, that's going to exhaust your troops in the long term. And so the entire strategy is not sustainable. So just from a military perspective, Ukraine has lost the war. Now, what's interesting is that because Ukraine has lost the war, NATO is going to double down because NATO cannot afford to lose the war. NATO has invested too much into the war. If NATO were to sign a peace agreement with Putin right now, Britain, France, Germany would all go bankrupt.